Good afternoon, everybody, it's really good to have an opportunity to be here with you and to introduce our panellists. So, as you know from ETA, my name is Bruce MacAdam. I'm from Synapse, the WA lead here. Alongside me, I have Narelle Little from Stroke Foundation. I have Antonella Segre from CEO of ADHD WA, and Dr. Lauren Taylor from Autism WA. So this afternoon we're just going to spend some time in particular looking at hearing a little bit about the different services that people offer and how they interact with people with a neurological condition. We're also going to hear a little bit about some of the challenges they are experiencing at the moment, particularly in their own particular communities. And then finally we're going to be talking a little bit about how we can benefit from opportunities for collaboration. So I think I'm going to ask Antonella, if you would just like maybe to kick us off with our first question. Tell us a little bit about your organisation and the kind of things you've been doing.
Yes, I come from a really interesting perspective because I've been in this role for 10 months. And, you know, and I think I was like everyone else in the outside world, which is not really privy to what really happens within this space of ADHD. And so the organization in itself, it's been around for 30 years, and it still, I think, is a mystery to many. And it is not funded. And up until 10 months ago, it was purely run by an extremely skilled board of management. And then they engaged in my services. What the organization does is, in order to survive, it actually established itself as a social enterprise model, which basically means it was at a point that they really felt we can't be here anymore. And their focus at the time was education, and we've heard a lot around education. And so they decided to look at it from a holistic point of view and established a clinic. So the organization does ADHD assessments, offers therapy, offers group therapy, offers educational programs, coaching, and really looks at taking the person through their journey. So if we look at having the assessment of a child at the age of 6, providing them with a series of programs that will enhance their ability to thrive through education with their parent, and then taking their journey through to high school and university and hopefully into the workplace as well. So it sounds like a lot, and we do it, but there's one problem, and we'll talk obviously later about the challenges, is that only those that are financially able can actually access the service. Because unfortunately, the public system is failing, and failing greatly to the community of ADHD. And we would love to see a change. So the organization obviously is very strong around advocacy.
Good. Thanks, Antonella. Narelle, your organisation got mentioned quite a bit this morning in terms of the work that's been going on for years in WA around stroke. So do you maybe tell a little bit about what Stroke Foundation is doing now, currently in 2023?
Sure. So I actually wasn't meant to be up here today. It was meant to be Luke Hayes. He's the national manager, but I am the community education coordinator. So that's my role. I'm only 2 days a week. So I'm not across everything that Stroke Foundation does. I haven't been there for that long. But yeah, we are so it's nice to know we've been mentioned, Bruce.
Oh, yes,
thank you.
Absolutely.
We are a national organisation, as most of you probably know, and we sort of really are the voice for stroke survivors and their carers and families, as well as clinicians and researchers. We work a lot with governments and also health systems and researchers to really get the message out about preventing stroke and treating stroke and overall beating stroke. We deliver community education sessions, so that's really my baby that I look after. That's the stroke safe talks that are out there run in the community, delivering with a focus on the FAST message. And they are delivered by people who are either stroke survivors themselves or have a lived experience of stroke. So they might have been a carer of someone or something like that. So that's that program, which is a national program. It was recently, they've just started actually, when I say national, they've only just recently started delivering talks in the Northern Territory, because there's a lady in South Australia actually that occasionally travels up there, so they've started in the Territory as well, delivering the fast message. We coordinate and the development of the clinical standards and guidelines for stroke care in hospitals, and provide information, advice and care navigation to stroke survivors and their carers through the Enable Me website, and also fund and support stroke research as well.
Great. Thank you, Narelle. I don't think Luke could have done better than that. That's great. Lauren, tell us a little bit about autism and your organisation.
So I represent the Autism Association of WA, and we were established in the late 1960s and are now one of the largest specialist disability organisations in Australia. So we support people who are on the autism spectrum across the whole lifespan and have a huge range of services. We do both children, youth and adult autism diagnosis. We've got early childhood supports and services, as well as therapies for school-age children and adults. We've got a positive behaviour support program as well. We also support many individuals who are on the spectrum with really, really high and quite complex support needs in community living and individual living environments. And we provide a whole range of training and consultancy and advocacy activities. So some of you might have heard about some of the activities that we've been involved in, such as sensory events. We run Sensitive Santa every year at a number of the shopping centres. We've also worked with organisations like the RAC Arena and the Dockers to set up sensory spaces for neurodivergent children and adults who might be accessing community events as well. So not only do we provide direct supports and services that are funded by the NDIS, but we're also doing lots of community inclusion and advocacy training and parent support groups as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Lauren. Thank you. And I just want to add a little bit about what Synapse does. And I mention that because we've been mentioned a couple of times, but that's because we've actually funded to do our job, which is to provide information and linkage. And our team is all about connecting organisations together in response to the needs of people who have got some form of brain injury. So we support people from birth right through to various different types of brain injury, including a stroke or a traumatic brain injury. And our services predominantly in WA are about providing linkage and information and education around brain injury. So it's great that organisations know about what we're doing, and that's a testament to the team, in particular Kylie Jackson, who some of you will know from the work that she's been doing in reaching out to organisations and providing connection. Because as you can hear, there's lots of different needs, but underpinning that is about getting people visible and getting people connected to services and being made aware of what's out there. So perhaps maybe we could come back to yourself, Antonella. Tell us a little bit about more about the challenges, particularly that your area is experiencing, and how you're addressing that.
Yeah, so today we've heard a lot, we tend to use a lot of data, and I can say that 1 in 20 adults and 1 in 20 children have ADHD, whether it be diagnosed or undiagnosed. So that's about 6 to 8% of the population. And we've heard around the justice system, and 47% of prisoners have undiagnosed ADHD, so very much in line, which was spoken about before. Challenges, stigma, the myths surrounding it, lack of recognition of the impact, not recognized by the NDIS, high prevalence of suicide distress. But I want to read you something that I received yesterday. I'm just going to give you this, sorry. And this really falls under the fact that there is real collaboration between what clinicians would like to achieve, but the challenges that we currently have where GPs cannot co-prescribe medication. This comes from a psychologist, from a psychiatrist, and it's the following. I had a 56-year-old lady, Joanna, who I diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 48 in 2015, with a history of depression and alcoholism, who died of alcohol and antidepressant overdose while attempting to get back in to see me for ADHD medication. She had not been able to afford to see me for a year, and she had run out of her ADHD medications again. She had relapsed with depression and alcohol. I organized for a GP to assess her medically, but she died on the 8th of March 2023, while on my cancellation list, with an appointment to see me on the 28th of the 3rd of 2023. I am convinced that if she'd been managed by a GP who could have initiated ADHD medication, she should be alive today. If you think that would make a difference when you speak to the Senate, which I am on Monday, we would both like her death, her and her brother, not to have been in vain. I think this is clarity when we talk about challenges. It is not the data. It's very simple to say so many people have ADHD. We have to look into their stories, we have to look into their daily lives, and we have to look into their challenges that they face every day. We have to look at a parent, what they go through before they even manage to get that child into the school, and then be absolutely face discrimination. And you know, as an organization, I take those calls. I take the calls that is either from the parent or the school, where there is actually, you know, parents not understanding what actually is going on. And then we're dealing with a huge percent, 40% of people with ADHD are not in employment. And that's not because they're not capable of employment. It is because our workplaces will not look at creating neurodiverse working environments to keep people engaged. So I think these are the biggest challenges that we have. And it's something that, unfortunately, ADHD seems to be jumping around and doesn't fit anywhere. You know, it doesn't fit. You go and speak to health, and health tells you no. You go and speak to education. You go and speak to workforce development. You go and speak to communities. So this is the biggest challenge that we're facing right now.
Yeah, thank you, Antonella. I'll get you to mention the Senate's piece at the end.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Narelle, tell us a little bit about what Stroke sees at the moment as some of its challenges it wants to manage.
Probably funding. To develop sustainable funding and thereby sort of investing more in what support services we can provide to the stroke community. I know my role is 0.4 FTE, which is very minimal amount, and even though we begged for more this year, we still got the same amount again. So, you know, we're trying in that case. But I think, so advocacy is very important for us, and a bit of a challenge to sort of decision makers in the community. I know that, you know, a lot of the national managers, including Luke, works very hard in that area to try and develop that relationship. So, and engaging with sort of everybody, our fellow organisations, so we can, you know, deliver the same message, which we are reasonably good at doing, but could probably improve in that area as well, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Narelle. Thanks. Lauren, where's autism at in terms of how does it see the different challenges it's facing?
I think many of the challenges that are faced by the autistic community are really shared by some of the ones that Antonella just described in relation to ADHD. So I won't rehash all of those, but I think some of the biggest challenges are around barriers to access in service, and that starts from paediatric services, where many children who are suspected of being autistic are unable to access any paediatric services, which then delays autism diagnosis. I work in a youth diagnostic team, and by the time we see the young people, many of them have withdrawn from mainstream education because their autism has been unidentified and they haven't been receiving the targeted or tailored supports in the education environment that they need. There's also incredible fragmentation between health, mental health and disability services, and that fragmentation has only increased with the introduction of the NDIS and the reduction in some of the community-based supports, which has really widened the gaps for people with disabilities who are, like we've heard already, bounced between health, mental health and disability services. Some of the other challenges are around the quality of support provision. So we've seen many more disability service organisations emerge over the past 10 or so years. And there are lots of organisations who don't have expertise or specialise in supporting very complex people who are on the autism spectrum. So that's often resulted in the breakdown of accommodation supports, which leaves people with very high support needs in either hospital or at risk of homelessness because of being or not receiving the supports that are adequate for their needs. And what was touched on, I think, in the earlier panel as well was about some of the planning processes around the NDIS. So we support many autistic adults who have ageing parents who now face annual planning processes. So whereas previously supports were for a lifespan, they're now facing increased stress, worry, anxiety about their ageing autistic children who have very high support needs, and are then facing planning meetings, often with planners who perhaps don't have the knowledge or expertise about autism to provide an adequate plan, and with funding mechanisms that aren't always transparent. So I think that's some of the challenges. I don't think it covers all of them, but at least covers some of the biggest challenges for the community.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think there's lots of commonality coming out in terms of the challenges that you've mentioned. You talked about fragmentation in particular. And I think that from our perspective, one of the things that we've seen in particular that comes through the door for Synapse is the people who are misunderstood in terms of their disability or their neurological condition. And when I talk about that, I'm having people come through our service doors who have a traumatic brain injury but are treated for mental health issues, and the brain injury is disregarded. And the impact of that on that person's life has been significant, to the point that some of them have chosen to present themselves to the recent Royal Commission because of the repeated issues that they've experienced through services. And that's largely because their disability has been misunderstood. And I think from what I can see, often there is a significant amount of lack of understanding around neurological disability and the breadth of it and the complexity of it, and the lack of appreciation of the kind of services that are sitting in this room that understand what it takes to actually make a difference to a person's life in the normal things. So we're very conscious of the fact that it's almost like a hidden disability that is not well understood, and it needs to be better understood, I think, from our point of view, to get better funding. So that's probably one of the challenges that we're seeing. I think probably now moving on to a bit more of the positive side of it. Maybe, Narelle, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that you're seeing? Sorry, I didn't mean to. Yeah, Narelle, you go first.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, so we have got a program at the moment called My Health for Life, which is a sort of a shared approach to government, really, and with other organisations, other non-for-profits, which is all about, it's a stroke prevention, health prevention program. Not in WA, unfortunately, it's Queensland government. And also Living Well After Stroke is another one of our programs that's got that sort of shared approach and shared sort of funding aspect to it, which seems to be the better way to go sometimes, instead of competing for money with each other all the time. And I think another opportunity is probably for us is really the peer support side of things. So I was going to say that probably is also a challenge, but for us, I think better recognition and advocacy of those peer support programs and benefits around that to help people that are living with the sort of the health conditions of stroke. Stroke Foundation does have a list of peer support programs on their website and things, Enable Me website, but we don't sort of fund those as such, so they're pretty much a run on their own. So I think that's a good opportunity as well as a challenge to get involved in that a bit more. And I guess better sharing of information amongst organisations, you know, that are all in the same sector as well, as we are doing today.
Thank you, Narelle. Thank you. Antonella, do you want to speak next about what your opportunities are?
Yeah, so I just wanted to concur with you. It's such an opportunity to keep on raising the profile of the benefits of peer-to-peer support. It really is part of that journey in being in a non-judgmental, well-understood group. And, you know, Karen, and, you know, you spoke about it before around that, you know, that. But there's some amazing opportunities for collaboration. I think that it just comes out of the room even today. The Neurological Council of WA has actually brought together all neurological conditions, and we've just established a leadership team, and the purpose of that is really around looking at what are the commonalities, what are the gaps, and how can we work collaboratively together to reach those aims, with the ultimate goal of supporting the whole of the neurological community. I think that there'll always be a challenge with that, purely because government does put us in a situation of fear. So organizations that are funded, you know, absolutely fear that government could potentially take that funding and basically look at to have to do more with less. And therefore, it's not that the organizations don't want to collaborate. I think government has a significant role to play in saying, here is a new amount of funding that is available. And, you know, and I speak for myself as a non-funded organization, we'd love to be able to tap into some of that. There's an amazing collaboration taking place also with organizations that are really keen to decrease the number of young people that are ending up within the justice system. And I came from a meeting today, and I can announce that there is an actual appetite now with the new Premier to have a change in the protocol at a magistrate point. So that first point of call when a young person touches the system, that they're actually diagnosed for ADHD, FASD, hearing, sight, and looking at diversionary programs, because we know when we hear all the bad, what's happening in Banksia Hill, which we delivered this morning some training to them as well, it's because they don't have the opportunity to have the tools. So there's some amazing, I think there's some great things that are happening, and there's a real willingness for that level of collaboration. I just think that we just need to take government a little bit more with us on that journey.
Great, thank you, Antonella. That's really encouraging to hear about the work that you've been doing along with FASD in terms of Banksia. That's fantastic. Also just want to recognise well that the mention of the peer groups. That's certainly an area of work that Synapse does, and we're certainly looking at it as a very strong way in which we can enable people with a brain injury for self-agency to be able to look at themselves and be able to work out how can they support each other to live their best life possible. And we're certainly an area we're continuing to work on as well. Do you want to, Lauren, talk a little bit about what Autism doing?
Yeah. So I think there's, like everyone has said, there's lots of opportunities for collaboration. I think to start with, it's nice to be sitting on a panel with ADHD WA, because we know that when one young person has a neurodevelopmental condition, they're also more likely to have a second or third or fourth neurodevelopmental condition. But currently, the system is set up so each of those are assessed and diagnosed separately, with no opportunity for families to integrate or synthesise all that information. So I think there's lots of opportunities for us from an assessment perspective to be working with other organisations, ADHD WA being one of them, to make sure that families are accessing a wealth of assessment options rather than just going down one diagnostic pathway. The Autism Association is also doing some work around systemic advocacy to improve health outcomes and health literacy for autistic people and their families. So that project is really about working with the health department, understanding and mapping families' access to different parts of the health system, and then developing better models of service so that we can improve access and outcomes for autistic people. One of my great passions to see in WA is a Tier 3 or Tier 4 mental health service, particularly for autistic people with intellectual disability who have really high support needs and often are not adequately supported in the community. So I think we could do much more collaboration within health and mental health to make sure those very complex people are understood from a multidisciplinary perspective and supported in the best way possible, because that's only going to improve their ability to have their best lives and good quality of life and access to the community and all the activities they want to do. So I think there's lots of multi-agency collaboration that could really improve the lives of autistic people.
Thank you, Lauren. Thanks. I think one of the things that comes across to me as I listen to our panel speak is the need for specialists in the particular area that they work in, so that we have the deep knowledge around how do we understand a particular condition, but also the capacity to work collaboratively, to bring people together to bring about an outcome. And that is perhaps what we've been experiencing here at Synapse. And Rura mentioned what we've been doing with them. But I'll give it a particular example, and I use this one because it actually didn't cost a lot of money, which is quite surprising. We were in connection with Rura in relation to a family and domestic violence program that's run out of the Belmont Police Station, because the Belmont Police Station has collaborated with the City of Belmont, and they've ended up with a family and domestic violence support person in the police station, which is quite innovative. But then we were talking to Rua, and they said they're having difficulties with a whole bunch of issues, and they seem to be largely to do with people who've got some form of brain injury. So we went down to the police station, which is just across the road from our office, and had a chat with the sergeant, who then invited us to go in and spend some time with the sergeants around talking about what's brain injury, what's their experience, how are they supporting their constables to enable them to be able to de-escalate these critical situations that they go in. So that was really, if you like, a very cooperative thing, was based on 3 different agencies getting together and really using time, not money, but using time differently to look at how can we improve what we already know about how we deal with these people. We know the situations we're going into, we understand the dynamics of that, how can we do it better? So that was a really good example of the way in which we've been able to collaborate within existing services to produce a better outcome as well. And also to highlight something as well that Rua's been doing. Rua invited Synapse in to do some information sessions with residents in some of their refuges. We provide information. We're not specialists in neurological conditions and nursing, but we've then collaborated with Etta and her nursing team, which is great to see you guys all here, who have now been going into the refuge and providing direct support to the residents on the back of the fact that they've started to learn to trust the fact that there are some people out there who will be able to help with them. So again, it's taking existing services and looking at how can you capitalise and leverage off what's already there to produce a better outcome just through communication and building relationships. So for us, we want to continue to do that as Synapse. We actually think that's a great way of going, and we're looking forward to doing that further in the future. And I certainly think sitting here next to the panel, I think that's certainly something we're all picking up on. How can we lend our expertise but work more collectively together to address issues? And I did mention very quickly, I wanted to give Antonella, do you want to talk a little bit about what's happening for you on Monday? Because that's a new adventure for you.
Yes, a very new adventure. It'll be my 11th month anniversary. So everybody think about me on that day. So it was amazing to finally see that after a long time coming, there's been a Senate inquiry into services around ADHD. And I don't know if you all may know, but adults have no access to public services. So we know that we're at a bottleneck for young people and children, but there's absolutely nothing available for that. So what's happening is that we put in a submission, so we did a lot of work around that, and especially my beautiful staff member who's in orange, which is the color of ADHD, pushing for submissions. My hope that will come out of the Senate inquiry is that the 660 stories that we shared with them will be listened to. That not only, as I said before, the data, so we've given so many recommendations, but we really hope, the chair, which is Dr. Michelle Toner, as we finalize that submission, she sent me a text and she says, I'm incredibly sad. And I called her and she was crying. And I said, why are you crying, Michelle? She's been advocating for ADHD for 40 years. And she said, because I just don't want them to hover over these 660 stories. I want them to read them because that is what's going to bring about the change. So the changes that we'll be advocating on Monday, we've got a 3-minute presentation to the Senate committee made up of 7 senators. We'll be really advancing the co-prescribing by GPs. There's already a pilot that's taking place, and we're part of another pilot that's been presented to the Minister for Health, which really sees a collaborative approach with the GP, obviously the family, the GP, the psychologist, the psychiatrist, or the pediatrician. So we'll really be advancing that. We're also obviously going to be advancing, please fund ADHD WA, because it's not about our empire building. We really want everyone to access our services. And the services are research informed. We've got a professional advisory body. So we really want to see some funding coming to WA. I mean, it's nowhere, but please make WA as the best practice model. Notice the orange. We really want to change the current justice system. We really are concerned about, from a social, so having 10-year-olds in there. We also really want to see full accessibility to everyone in the community. And what the reality is, do I really believe that I'm in 3 minutes and 45 minutes of question time will achieve all of these aims? No. But what will be is that we now will have a roadmap. And that roadmap will enable us to have evidence to advocate at a state and at a federal level that change needs to come. And as you said, we always say ADHD comes with a friend. And therefore, if we, which is autism, which is dyslexia and dyspraxia, mental health, depression, anxiety, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, if we can change one side of that system, we'll be able to benefit everyone else. So that is what our aim is.
Great. Well, good luck on Monday. Thank you, Antonella. And thank you, Dr. Lorraine Taylor. Thank you very much for coming along. And thank you, Narelle Little. Thank you for joining us. Please thank the panel for their time.